All right, so everyone's talking about this new AI rule, right? It's pretty complex stuff. But you came to the right place if you want the inside scoop, because we're going to dive deep into how the U.S. government is trying to, control the global AI landscape, specifically with these super powerful computer chips that are, basically the brains of any advanced AI.
Yeah, that's right. This new rule, it's called the Interim Final Rule on Artificial Intelligence Diffusion. It dropped on January 13th, 2025. And it's a really big deal because it's not just about the technology itself. It's really about, global power.
Okay, so let's try to unpack this. From what I understand, the U.S. is kind of walking a tightrope here. They want to encourage AI development, especially with their allies, but they also want to prevent any misuse of the technology by, let's just say less friendly nations.
Yeah.
How do they plan to do that?
Well, the rule sets up a system for controlling the flow of these high-powered chips. It's kind of like you can think of it like a global marketplace with very specific rules about who can buy what.
So a VIP section for the good guys and then restrictions for everybody else.
Exactly. The rule lays out 6 different mechanisms for accessing these chips. Or pathways, I guess you could say. And the level of access that you get really depends on your relationship with the U.S. and your track record with using this kind of technology.
Okay, so let's start with the VIPs then. Who gets that all-access pass?
Well, 18 key U.S. allies get unrestricted access to these chips. So we're talking about countries like Canada, the UK, Japan, South Korea, the usual suspects in terms of close partnerships.
Makes sense. Strength in numbers, right? Okay, but what about smaller projects like research initiatives and things like that? Do they need to jump through a bunch of hoops to get access?
Not necessarily. For most research and non-threatening applications, there's a streamlined process. If an order doesn't need more computational power than something like 1,700 advanced GPUs, then they don't need a special license.
Okay, but help me out here. 1,700 GPUs. What does that even mean in the real world? What kind of AI could you build with that?
So think of it this way. It's enough to train a really sophisticated AI for a specific task, like maybe analyzing medical images or translating languages in real time. It's significant power, but it's not enough to build a massive surveillance system or, a super intelligent weapon or something like that.
Got it. So it's you have a powerful engine, but not a whole spaceship. What about larger scale projects then that need more firepower? Is there a way for them to get access to more of these chips?
Absolutely. That's where the verified end user statuses come in. There's universal and national. These are exclusive clubs for trusted entities that meet strict security and ethical standards.
Okay, break those down for me. Who gets to be a universal verified end user or UVU?
So that's reserved for highly trusted companies and organizations that are based in allied countries. And it's a pretty big deal because UVEU status allows them to place a significant amount of AI computing power, up to 7% of their global capacity, in countries all around the world.
So they can basically operate globally with fewer restrictions. That's a lot of trust. What about national verified end user status then? Who's eligible for that?
Well, that one's open to trusted entities in any country that's not considered a country of concern. And it allows them to buy the equivalent of 320,000 advanced GPUs over a 2-year period.
So it's like a national level version of the UVU. It incentivizes responsible AI development, but on a slightly smaller scale.
You got it. It creates a pathway for countries that may not be a formal U.S. ally, but they're still committed to using AI responsibly.
Okay, this all sounds very structured and tiered.
Yeah.
But what about everyone else? Who doesn't fit into those neat little categories? Are they just left out in the cold?
Not completely. Even entities without any special status can still buy chips. But there's a per-country cap. They're limited to the equivalent of 50,000 advanced GPUs. It's enough for substantial projects, but it definitely sets some limits.
So it's kind of a balancing act between allowing access to the technology, but preventing its misuse. And I'm guessing this per-country cap plays a big role in how the U.S. is managing that risk.
Precisely. It's a way to monitor and control the flow of these powerful chips to countries that might not be on the same page as the U.S. in terms of AI ethics and security.
It's like a global game of chess, where each move is carefully calculated to maintain some kind of strategic advantage.
That's a great way to put it. And it gets even more interesting because the rule also has a provision for government-to-government agreements.
Oh, this is where the diplomacy comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like a bonus round for countries that play nice.
Exactly. Countries that align their policies with the U.S. on key issues like export controls, technology security, and even clean energy. They can actually double their chip purchasing caps. So they can buy up to 100,000 advanced GPUs, twice the amount that's allowed for those non-verified entities.
This is like a carrot and stick approach. The U.S. is saying, we'll reward you for good behavior. But there are consequences if you go rogue.
Right. And it gives the U.S. leverage to encourage other countries to adopt similar standards and practices, to try to foster a more responsible global AI landscape.
So far, we've talked about how this new rule encourages the diffusion of U.S. technology, especially with allies. But there's another side to this coin, right? What about limiting access for those countries of concern that you mentioned earlier? How does the rule actually achieve that?
That's where things get really interesting. The rule has 3 main mechanisms for targeting countries of concern and limiting their access to advanced AI technology. And it all boils down to controlling the most critical components of powerful AI systems.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into those restrictions.
So first and foremost, the rule restricts the sale of the most advanced chips specifically designed for training large, powerful AI systems. These are like the heavy hitters, the ones that are capable of processing massive data sets and powering those cutting-edge AI applications.
So countries of concern are essentially cut off from the top-tier hardware.
Exactly. They can still access chips for more general computing or consumer electronics, but not the kind that would let them develop AI systems that could be a direct threat to the U.S. or its allies.
Makes sense strategically. It's kind of like saying you can have a car, but not a Formula One race car. You can still get around, but you're not winning any Grand Prix races.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's about limiting their ability to reach those highest levels of AI sophistication.
Okay, so that's the first restriction. What's the second way the rule targets these countries?
The second one focuses on protecting something called closed-weight models. These are advanced AI models where the core information, it's known as model weights, is kept secret.
Okay, I need a little help on this one. Model weights. That sounds pretty technical. Can you break that down for me?
Sure. So think of an AI model like a complex recipe. It has all the instructions for how to perform a specific task, like recognizing faces in a photo or writing different kinds of creative content. The model weights are like the secret ingredients. They're like the precise measurements and proportions that make that recipe work perfectly.
Ah, got it. So these model weights are what make a particular AI model unique and effective.
Exactly. They're the result of training the model on huge amounts of data, and they really hold the key to its performance.
So by restricting the transfer of these model weights, the U.S. is essentially preventing countries of concern from replicating or stealing its most valuable AI breakthroughs.
That's right. It's a way to safeguard U.S. technological leadership and make it much harder for adversaries to catch up without going through the same rigorous and costly development process.
It's like protecting the secret formula for Coca-Cola. You don't want that knowledge falling into the wrong hands.
Exactly. It's intellectual property, but with potentially much higher stakes. And that brings us to the third mechanism for targeting these countries. Cybersecurity.
Okay, so this makes sense. If these AI models are so valuable, they need to be locked down tight.
Absolutely. The rule sets very specific requirements for how these sensitive AI models must be stored and used, making it much harder for adversaries to steal them or tamper with them.
So it's like building a digital Fort Knox to protect these valuable assets.
Yeah, that's a good way to visualize it. We're talking about protecting some of the most powerful and potentially disruptive technology in the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, talking about how the U.S. is encouraging responsible AI development, but also putting up those guardrails to prevent its misuse. But what does this all actually mean for the future? What are the real-world implications of this global AI power struggle that we're seeing?
That's the million-dollar question. And there are really several potential scenarios to consider. One possibility is that this competition could actually lead to even faster advancements in AI technology. Imagine a global race with everybody pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It's like a space race.
But for artificial intelligence. Exciting, but also maybe a little bit scary. Exactly. We could see incredible breakthroughs in fields like medicine, energy, materials science. But this rapid progress could also have a downside. More sophisticated autonomous weapons, more powerful surveillance systems, and maybe even unforeseen consequences that we haven't even considered yet.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Tremendous potential for good, but also potential risks that are hard to predict.
Precisely. And it's not just about the technology itself. It's about the global balance of power. These restrictions on countries of concern, they could really heighten geopolitical tensions.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. These countries are probably not going to be happy about being excluded from accessing the most advanced AI technology. How might they react?
It's hard to say for sure, but they might see this as an attempt to contain their growth, and maintain U.S. dominance. We could see a more fragmented internet with different countries developing their own AI ecosystems and standards.
So instead of a global village, we might end up with separate AI empires, each with their own rules and agendas.
It's a real possibility, and that could lead to more mistrust, increased economic competition, maybe even cyber conflicts. We're entering uncharted territory here.
It's a lot to process. We've talked about potential benefits and risks. But what about the economic fallout? This new rule is bound to shake things up in the tech industry, right?
Without a doubt, the global tech landscape is going to shift dramatically. Some companies might benefit from increased demand for their products, while others might struggle to adapt to these new restrictions. Investment flows could change directions, and innovation could be stifled in certain areas.
Wow, this new rule is a big deal. And it really highlights how AI is no longer just a futuristic concept. It's already reshaping the world.
Exactly. And the choices we make today, both individually and collectively, will determine what that future looks like.
So where do we go from here? What should we be thinking about as we navigate this complex landscape?
That's a great question. And it brings us to some fundamental questions about the future of AI. It's not just about who has the most powerful technology. It's about how we use it, who benefits from it, and what kind of world we want to create with it.
Yeah, it sounds like we're at a crossroads. This new rule is a bold move by the US. But it's just the beginning of a much larger conversation about AI and its role in the world.
I think that's right. It's not just a U.S. issue either. It's really a global challenge that requires a lot of international cooperation and dialogue.
So it's not just about the US setting the rules then. It's about working together to shape a future where AI benefits everyone.
Exactly. And that conversation needs to include not just governments and these big tech companies, but also ethicists, social scientists, and everyday citizens. We all have a stake in this.
Because AI is going to affect all of us, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, it already is. From the algorithms that curate our social media feeds to the AI-powered tools that are transforming entire industries, AI is already woven into the fabric of our lives. We need to be more aware of its influence and think more intentionally about how we want to use it.
So just to recap, the US has rolled out this new rule to try to control access to these powerful AI chips. It's a complex system with different tiers of access for allies, verified end users, and everyone else. And it specifically targets those countries of concern to limit their ability to develop potentially dangerous AI systems.
Yeah, that's a great summary. It's definitely a delicate balancing act between fostering innovation and safeguarding national security.
And we talked about some of the potential consequences too, like an acceleration of AI development, increased geopolitical tensions, and major shifts in the global tech landscape. It's a lot to think about.
It is, and it really underscores that AI is no longer science fiction. It's a really powerful force that is actively shaping our world right now.
So where does this leave us then? What are some key takeaways for our listeners as they're thinking about the future of AI?
I think the most important takeaway is that we all need to be engaged in this conversation. We need to learn about AI, think critically about its implications, and voice our concerns and aspirations. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's something that we're all creating together.
And this deep dive is a great place to start. We unpacked the complexities of this new rule, explored its potential impact, and hopefully sparked some curiosity about the bigger questions surrounding AI and its role in our world.
I think we did a good job.
I think so too. So to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions. This is really just the beginning of an incredible journey into the age of AI, and we're all along for the ride.